Okay, so welcome everyone to the Fraser Valley Conservancy's Nature Stewardship School. This is our Wildlife in Winter webinar where you're going to learn how Fraser Valley critters survive in the cold and ways that you can help. And so today your hosts are going to be myself. I'm Tamsin Baker. I'm the Stewardship Coordinator with the Fraser Valley Conservancy. And joining me here today is Aleesha Switzer. She's project biologist. She's waving at you with the Fraser Valley Conservancy. And so you'll probably notice you're all muted. That's the way it is going to stay. But there will be time for questions. So we're going to suggest that you do your questions in the chat. That's a great way, and then we'll read them and answer them the best we can. So as we get rolling here, just wanted to acknowledge that the Fraser Valley Conservancy does its work on the traditional territory of the Stolo First Nation. The Stolo means river, and the people of the river have been stewarding in this land for many generations. And so today, we're here to share knowledge and stories and learn about ways that we all can be caretakers of this land. So now, since we do have quite a few people here, some familiar and some new, some of you may not have heard about the Fraser Valley Conservancy. And so just to give you a quick overview, the Fraser Valley is, the Conservancy is the local Fraser Valley Charitable Land Trust. We've been around since 1998. And our vision is to protect and enhance the natural areas in the Fraser Valley. And we do this to benefit native species, ecosystems, and local communities. The activities we focus on tend to be land related, so land stewardship and land securement. And we do lots of different really interesting projects. I encourage you to check out our website and you'll learn a lot more about the different things that we do. So going back to, today, this is our agenda for today. So what we're going to do is Aleesha is going to kick things off to talk about how Fraser Valley critters survive the winter. And then I'm going to talk about how you can help them not just survive, but thrive. And then we'll wrap up with sort of where the Nature Stewardship School is going from here. Just again, I want a reminder that everyone is muted. It's got quite a few of you here, and that you're free to ask questions, but please ask them in the chat box, and Aleesha and I will do our best to monitor that. So with that being said, we also want to have a bit of fun. So there's going to be some surveys tonight, some questions to be answered. We want some participation from you guys. So this is going to be our first experiment with this. So it's question time. We would like to know where you all are from. Where are you today? So a poll should have popped up on your screen. Please pick where you're from. We'll just give it a little bit of time, let everyone fill it out here. Okay, we'll give it some time. Great. I think a few of you are still more participating here. Okay. So we think, Aleesha, should we, I think.
Yes, so it's asking Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Mission, Langley, Metro Vancouver, outside of Metro Vancouver.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Okay, I think we'll close the poll now. Great. So it looks like a lot of you are from the Fraser Valley. Fantastic. But also you have welcome from Metro Vancouver, and even a few went outside of Metro Vancouver. So welcome everyone. This is great. Wonderful. So okay. So that's you guys did that great. We'll have a few more of those coming up. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to pass things over to Aleesha, who is going to kick things off with her presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tamsin. Hi, everybody. I'm Aleesha Switzer. It's great to have you with me today. And I am going to start sharing my screen now to show you how Fraser Valley critters survive the winter. So let's go. All right. So, wildlife in winter, how Fraser Valley critters survive the cold. So we're going to be talking about survival strategies. And survival strategies have evolved over thousands of years here in the Fraser Valley to help our species cope with the changing seasons. And some strategies evolved millions of years ago, like fur. So here we have an early ancestor, the cynodonts. They were early mammals, and their fur evolved 225 million years ago. So that's a long time for that survival strategy to be around. So right off the bat, we're going to get you thinking about surviving in the winter. So it's question time. We are going to ask you, which one of these strategies are only available to humans to survive in the winter? Which of these strategies is something only humans can use to survive the winter? Going on a vacation, changing into a warm coat, finding shelter, turning up the furnace, or stocking the pantry. Only humans can do this. Give you a couple more seconds here. Wait for the final results to come in. Getting all warmed up. All right, I'm going to close the poll. And, most of you, I see, have the same thing in mind, turning up the furnace. And yes, absolutely. Only humans can turn up the furnace. But really, what I want you to think about is going on a vacation, changing into a warm coat, finding shelter, stocking the pantry. These are all survival strategies that critters in the Fraser Valley can use. And there are some unique strategies that humans just can't do, like having completely different life stages, mastering metabolisms, hibernating, and brumating. So let's examine these 8 strategies together and learn about Fraser Valley critters in the cold. And we'll start with number 1, migrating. And many Fraser Valley critters migrate seasonally. And an example of that is our western toad. They'll migrate from the forests to the pond to lay their eggs, and then they'll come back to the forest to spend the winter. And it's a pretty short distance. Some Fraser Valley critters travel long distances, like sockeye salmon. You can see that salmon travel over 2,000 kilometers from the coast to feed in the summer. And then when they're adults, come all the way back inland to lay their eggs. When it comes to winter migrations, there's one type of bird that's a popular topic of discussion, and that is the hummingbird. And that takes us to question number 2. So this question says, the 2 most common hummingbirds in the Fraser Valley are Anna's hummingbird and Rufus hummingbird. Which of the following is true? Both Anna's and Rufus stay year-round. Anna's stays and Rufus leaves. Rufus stays and Anna's leaves, or both hummingbirds leave. So let's test your hummingbird knowledge. What do you think? Get those votes in. How do these critters survive the winter? Stay, go. Couple more seconds here. All right, we're ending the polling now. Here we go. So a majority of us chose Anna stays and Rufus leaves, but there are quite a few of us who aren't sure. So let's see what the answer is. The answer is B. The Anna's hummingbird stays and the Rufus leaves. So why do 2 species of hummingbirds have different winter behaviors? The answer is a quick adapter versus a long-term planner. So Anna's hummingbird is a quick adapter. It actually started out in California and only arrived in BC in the 1940s. And this is believed to be because of the non-native flowering plants and the sugar water feeders that are now available to them. They're commonly found in urban habitats, so areas that are quite different, where they can adapt to non-natural habitat types. And their populations are increasing. The rufous hummingbird, on the other hand, leaves for the winter, and it actually undertakes the longest migration in the world when you compare body size to distance traveled. They overwinter in Mexico and the Gulf states, and breed up here in our Pacific Northwest rainforests. Their migration is timed with the blooming of our native plant species, like the red flowering currant and salmonberry. So they're very tuned in to our native cycles here and the native plants we have. And their populations are decreasing. Again, it's suspected that's largely because a lot of the native habitats here have changed so much. Let's talk about another strategy, like changing your coat. When you don't wear clothes, what does that look like? Well, you could grow a thicker coat, like our coyotes do. Or you could gain an extra layer of insulating downy feathers, like our resident geese. So many Canada geese migrate, but the geese that stick around get an extra layer of down to keep them warm in the winter. One of the best ways to survive winter is really just to find a safe spot. And this can be a strategy all on its own or part of another strategy that you use. Our northwestern salamanders hide away all winter long. When their ponds freeze over and it would be really chilly to stay in the snow, you'll find them under logs on the forest edge where they can be safe. Salmon have another unique hiding spot, and that's under gravel. So we had salmon come up and breed in our streams just a few weeks ago. You might find salmon bodies in the stream still. But the eggs that they laid actually hide in the gravel. Some of them hatch out. And it's important for them to have all of that rock and gravel habitat available so they can stay safe in the winter. Stocking up the pantry, not just for people. Critters do it too. They hide food in small caches, like our Douglas squirrel and our red-breasted nuthatch here. That way they have food that's available for them when it's hard to find food in the winter. Another strategy would just be to create a huge stockpile of food for the whole family. And the Fraser Valley stockpile expert is also a master engineer. Do you know who that could be? Let's find out. It's question time. I'm going to ask you who you think the Fraser Valley animal famous for massive winter stockpiles is also an expert builder. Could it be the Douglas squirrel, the North American beaver, the pileated woodpecker, or the northern red-legged frog? Famous Fraser Valley animal is an expert builder and makes huge stockpiles. A couple more seconds for our last votes here. All right. So we did learn that the Douglas squirrel can make these little caches of food, but the expert builder really is the North American beaver. And beavers around here make those big lodges like the one you see in the photo. And that isn't just a home, but also a place where they can store food. You see, beavers, they eat the bark off of tree branches, and they'll eat that all winter long. And a great place to store your branches is underwater so they don't get frozen. So this nice, warm beaver lodge is a great place to have your snacks and your home all in one. All right, our next strategy is hibernating, sleeping your worries away. And here in the Fraser Valley, we have a famous hibernator, the black bear. And hibernation is really about going to sleep for the winter. You gain lots of weight in the fall, eating as many berries and salmon as you can. And then while you're asleep, the fat is burned to keep the body warm enough to survive. When you're asleep, you use a lot less energy too. So it's a good strategy to use to survive the winter. We also have other hibernators here that you might not typically think about, like big brown bats. Bats will hibernate in rock crevices, in caves, and sometimes in buildings too. Now, brumation is something that a lot of people haven't heard about, and this is a survival strategy for cold-blooded critters. When you look at the graph here, we can see the top line is for the mouse. When your body temperature stays consistent, like a warm-blooded animal, it doesn't really matter what the environmental temperature is. When you're a cold-blooded critter, like the lizard, your body temperature depends on the environmental temperature. And take a look at what happens when it gets really cold. The lizard's body temperature also gets super cold. And this is when they enter a state called brumation. You're awake, but your body's so cold, you can't move very much. So, question time. Again, we're thinking about Fraser Valley critters. So, which of these Fraser Valley critters would brumate? It's multiple choice, so select all of the critters you think would brumate. Western painted turtle, common garter snake, Pacific tree frog, rough-skinned newt. Which of these would brumate? Give you a second to think about that. Lots of votes coming in. This is great. Just a couple more seconds here.
And a reminder that if you have questions during this, you can put them in the chat and we'll try and answer them when Aleesha's done her section.
All right, we're going to end the poll. So lots of votes for garter snake and rough-skinned newt. Couple votes for tree frog and western painted turtle. Let's see what the answer is. Well, all of these critters would brumate. These are all cold-blooded critters, critters whose body temperature relies on the outside temperature. Western painted turtles are going to brumate underwater in the mud. That's where they'll spend the winter. Garter snakes are going to brumate, be cold and sleep in dens, in rocks, and in these burrows where they can stay underground and warm. The Pacific tree frog, they're going to be brumating in, again, rock crevices, old mammal burrows. You may also find them in the siding of your house or somewhere close to you that they can stay warm. Rough-skinned newts are able to go back and forth between the pond and the forest, but since they're so cold, they can't move very fast, so they have to be careful. All right, our next one is to master your metabolism and eat like there's no tomorrow. Some animals keep themselves warm by generating their own heat constantly. But how do they get the energy to shiver all day and through the night? Well, they spend all day eating, like dark-eyed junco or the mule deer. And there's a master of spending all day eating, and that is our resident black-capped chickadee. They eat up to 60% of their body weight every day to stay warm and create fat reserves. Could you imagine eating more than half your body weight every single day? They cache food and remember feeding spots. thousands of different spots. These birds have an amazing ability to remember where the food is. At night, they go into a controlled hypothermia to slow down their metabolism. So instead of the energy needed to fly around, zoom, 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 they actually control their metabolism at night. And finding a safe spot at night where they can stay warm is just as important as finding food. The warmer they are, the less fat they have to burn. And finally, number 8 is using different life stages. So an example of this is seeds with a thick coat. They survive over winter underground, and once the spring temperatures warm up and the sunlight hits them, they come up and become a completely different thing. The masters of the weird and the wild, though, are insects. If you can imagine a life strategy for winter, insects have done it. They're so diverse. So at the bottom, we see 2 forms of dragonfly, where you have the adult with wings, and the juvenile right next to it can stay underwater for years. Here we have the western tiger swallowtail butterfly. They turn into this chrysalis over winter. It looks nothing like it, completely different creature. So that's my quick introduction to wildlife in winter, and we have a little bit of time for questions.
Great, thanks, Aleesha. So just a reminder to everyone that you're going to stay muted, but please ask questions in the chat so we can answer them. We have a few minutes. So there are looks like a couple questions, Aleesha. Mm-hmm. So Deb Jack mentions about the snakes. She thought snakes gather together and share whatever heat they might be generated by being in a ball underground.
Absolutely.
Question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the spring, when they emerge, they'll form these huge breeding balls where they come together, and the heat of the snakes attracts each other to the ball, along with all the pheromones that are being released. You'll often find snakes together in the winter and in the early spring, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then we also have some questions about hummingbirds. What about hummingbirds, and how much food do hummingbirds eat daily?
Great question. Yeah, and I think that really varies with the temperature. Again, if it's a super, super cold winter, you'll see hummingbirds visiting the feeder a lot. Tamsin's going to talk more about hummingbird feeder care, but it's important when you think about temperatures dropping and hummingbirds needing to eat, that they have access to that feeder as often as they need it. Because if you're just drinking sugar water and you don't have fatty things like the chickadees have access to, you're going to need to eat quite a bit to survive.
Okay, then we have questions are coming in here. What do geese eat when they overwinter here in the valley?
Naturally, they would be feeding on any sort of pond vegetation or anything that you can find kind of in a natural pond. So one of the reasons why we have such effective overwintering geese is the availability of that pond matter here in the Fraser Valley. Our ponds don't consistently freeze over for long periods of time, so there's access to all sorts of food for them.
Okay, question about how long is the cycle of a butterfly? Don't think very long.
Yeah. There are different strategies for different butterflies even. There are some who might reproduce twice in a year. There are some who reproduce once in a year. So it depends on the butterfly. And we have some very interesting critters here in the Fraser Valley. And I wish I could answer that question for all of them, but take a look at some of the insects we have here in the Fraser Valley, and you will be really impressed at the diversity and the many different ways that even butterflies survive here.
Okay, then we have a question about owls. It's a good question. Do owls migrate? And if not, how big is their territory?
Some owls migrate and some don't. So we have some resident owls and some migratory owls. the Fraser Valley Conservancy actually has an owl ID guide on our website, and you can bring it out with you and take a look at all the different owls that you'll see in the Fraser Valley. There's a snowy owl that comes only during winter. There are some owls that you'll only see in the summer. So lots of in and out with the owls that we have here, and some stay year round.
And then, so some more questions about hummingbirds, but I think I'll probably be able to address them in my section.
Great.
And then the question about wood frogs, which is not actually, I believe, a species that we have here.
Correct.
Yeah, what category do they fall into?
Right, so wood frogs, they are amphibians. Amphibians are cold-blooded. So they are a more northern species. And I'm guessing you're talking about wood frogs because you've heard their amazing survival strategy, which is to create a kind of antifreeze in their blood that allows them to basically become frozen and then reanimate. That's an amazing survival strategy. Our frogs and toads here do not use that strategy. They all find a place where they can be underwater or under muck that will allow them to not freeze. If they freeze, they will die. So we don't have wood frogs here in the Fraser Valley, and access to safe places to overwinter is very important for our local amphibians.
Okay, we've got questions rolling in here. Are trumpeter swans just passing through, or are they overwintering here?
I wish I were a swan expert. And please, people who know about birds, chime in if you know the answer to this. I believe they're migrating through. I don't think they're residents, but I'm sure there are much more birdie people than I who can confirm that. Hopefully somebody here can help.
Okay, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock here. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll try and circle back by the end. Just mention one, I see one question is, are black squirrels Douglas squirrels too?
So we have a native species of squirrel called the Douglas squirrel. And then we have a non-native species, which is the European gray squirrel. And the European gray squirrel will come in the color gray and black. So any gray or black squirrel you see, they're both the European gray squirrel. That's the non-native species. The little brown guy, that's our native Douglas squirrel.
Okay, well, I think we have time just for one more here. Do beavers build dams all year round, or do they just try to survive the winter?
So dams are important to create flooded areas, and those flooded areas allow beavers to access their lodge. So their lodge is their home where they can come raise their little pups and have their winter stockpiles, but the dams are something different. They're to stop water and flood an area so that that beaver lodge, that home, is always protected by water and the beavers can swim in and out of it.
I see someone has put an answer in about the swans, that they're on their way to Washington, but will overwinter in Delta, like in certain flooded areas. So thank you for helping answer that.
Thank you, bird friends. I knew you were out there.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, I think, and then are there any brown bears living in the Fraser Valley? And I think you mean grizzly bears. Is that, Aleesha, you want to take that one?
No.
Okay. Well, I think well, we've got black bears here, and brown bears can also, I think if you mean grizzly bears, no, they haven't, while their range has been expanding, it used to be everywhere, but obviously it's sort of changed over the years. I think they are in Squamish now and other areas further east, but I don't think they're in this region yet. Okay, well, yeah,
it's
so
7 o'clock.
Yeah, okay, so we'll try and circle back with the other chance for questions later, but we're gonna move along to my section here, which is, I'm gonna share my screen with you guys. Here we go. And I'm going to start the presentation, give it a moment here. Okay, so I'm gonna be talking about tips on helping critters thrive this winter. And so to really, the one thing you need to remember is that critters rely on the same things that humans need to survive, which is we need food to provide energy, shelter for protection, and water to stay nicely hydrated. So the first tip we have here is really, it's good to remember to try to, you want to keep wildlife wild and keep it safe. Along that line, keeping feeding animals is not a good idea. It can cause problems, not just for them, but for us as well. By attracting animals, by trying to feed them, like, say bears are attracted to garbage, or, raccoons, they can turn into pests, as we know. And that's not good. You're changing their behavior, that they start to anticipate areas where there's food. Really, they should be out in the natural landscape, getting the food they would normally eat. And it's also important to, the food, you don't want to be feeding animals inappropriate food, which can be very harmful. So it can promote malnutrition, if things are not digestible, don't have enough nutrients. And when animals are brought together, it can help spread disease as well. And a good example of this, some of you probably have seen, is the feeding of ducks and geese and that kind of thing in parks. And that's something that is while it may be fun, it's not good for these birds. And especially certain foods are very not appropriate. Like I mentioned, foods that promote malnutrition. Bread is one of those, so never, bread is just not a good choice. And not only that, but by putting the food out there, you could be attracting in parks, rats and other pests as well, and as well helping to spread disease. So, and right now I believe there's a lot of bylaws and things, it's not encouraged to do this in parks. And you could, if you're doing it near the water's edge, you could be polluting the environment as well. So yeah, you want to encourage critters as much as you can to be out there using the landscape for what they're meant to do. So, but and that being said, of course, I want to touch on something that we all love to do, which is feeding backyard birds in the winter. And of course, bird feeders, having them out, they're wonderful to watch. It's a great source of entertainment, hours of entertainment watching them. And they are a good thing in the wintertime. They do help supplement the missing food that would have been found naturally in the region over the winter months. So they really help the birds survive. However, if you choose to have bird feeders, with bird feeders comes great responsibility. And it's very important the best times of the year to have them are between October and March, so the fall and winter months. This is because this is when they need the food to supplement their diet, to get through those tougher months, to give them the energy they need. But when the spring and summer roll around, there's enough food out there for them to survive. They don't need the feeders to survive. And also it's important that if you are feeding birds with feeders, to be consistent with feeding them through the whole time. They get used to knowing where the food is. So if they show up and there's no food, they're gonna have to spend energy going out there looking for other sources of food. So you want to be consistent as well. Now, I mentioned, you want to reduce the chance of spreading disease. So you want to keep those feeders nice and clean. You can use a 10% bleach dilution, and that's a really good thing. Otherwise, like this poor little bird here in the corner, this poor house finch, diseases are like eye diseases and things. They are real, and they can really harm the birds. And if it snows, like this other picture shows, make sure to make the feeders clear so that they can access the food as well. And placement of a bird feeder is really important. Choose a sheltered location away from the elements, so away from rain, snow, wind. And like this picture shows, see if you can put it near evergreen plants. It has extra shelter. You want shelter for the animals, the birds, to be able to fly to if they need to, but as well as some visibility so they can see if any predators are around trying to get them. And I know I just said it's lovely to watch birds feeding on feeders, but if you can, keep them as far away from windows as possible to reduce the chance of window strikes. And of course, and if it has to be close, you can try and place them less than 1 meter away and use decals and ways that birds can realize there's a window there so they don't smack into it accidentally. And of course, we're not the only ones that love bird feeders. Our friendly pet cats love them too. They see them as a bit of a buffet. And so you really want to reduce the chances of Kitty causing a bit of mayhem at the bird feeder. And obviously the best way to do this is to have an indoor cat. However, if your cat is outside, either monitor them to make sure they're not causing trouble, or you can also put a bell around their neck or a bib or something that will alert the birds that the cat is around. And then, of course, if you want to attract a diversity of birds, and I'm not going to get into the whole different types of bird feeders, but just to say, you know, try a variety of bird feeders. Different birds feed in different ways. So, you know, try out different things like that. And in terms of bird feed, it's really best to try, you know, these birds need energy. They need high calorie, high fat foods. So certain seeds are really good. So sunflower seeds apparently are very great, very high in calorie. The best thing to do, because I don't want to get into the whole details on this one, but is there are local nature stores that you can go in and talk to about what are the best seed mixes for different birds. But also suet is popular, which you can purchase or you could make to feed the birds. Although if the weather warms up, you want to make sure it doesn't turn rancid. So just monitor that. Now, as fun as it is, you know, it's cute watching squirrels try and attack your feeder. That's very entertaining. But in generally, you want to choose feeders that are wildlife proof to stop pests, such as squirrels. They disrupt the feeding routine of the birds, and they just like a mess and trouble, and you just don't want to ideally attract them. Some feeders I've seen are weight bearing. So when the squirrel just really heavy gets on, it pushes it down, which blocks the exit of the food. So that's a good way to do that. And another thing you want to be careful about is fallen seed. So a fallen seed, you know, when birds, they can make a mess, drop the seeds, those can attract rodents. And if they're near your house, that's a pest you don't want around. So we recommend you regularly clean up fallen seed. But another thing you could do is put out a tray underneath, collect the fallen seed, makes it easier for cleanup. Okay, so a lot of questions about hummingbirds. And yes, definitely, you know, they're great birds, you know, feed in the winter. As Aleesha mentioned, the Anna's birds, they stay year round. They stay year round because of the plants in our gardens and because people have been feeding them. And so to feed them, you create a sugar water recipe. So four parts boiled water, 1 part white sugar, that's it. You don't need coloring, you don't need honey, you don't need anything else. That's just pure sugar water. And again, like I mentioned with the other bird feeders, if you want to feed hummingbirds in the winter, you must fully commit. They really will. They know where that food is and they rely on it. And they're high energy birds. They need the energy. So you don't want to let them down. But of course, what happens when the temperature drops and your feeders start freezing? Well, one thing is you can buy feeder warmers, which can help, or consider buying a couple feeders and rotate them, you know, during the day and night, so that this stops, you know, one from freezing. You always put in like lukewarm solution that will hopefully not freeze as soon, and things like that should help it stay free, ice free. And again, I just want to reiterate too about remember to clean these feeders as well to prevent the spread of disease. It's recommended that you clean your hummingbird feeder once a week during the winter. Okay, so that's my talk section on feeders. So now we're going to going back to talking about habitats and helping critters in their natural habitats. And as I hope you heard from Aleesha's talk, that our local wildlife is well adapted to survive in our region. And the critters, they're used to taking advantage of the natural landscape around them. But as we all know, looking around where we live, the landscape has certainly changed with housing and development, and, you know, so the habitat's not as much as it used to be. But what we can do is we can give back some of these habitat features that they may need to survive. So again, I want to reiterate the 3 basic needs for survival, which are food, shelter, and water. So keep that in mind. So now we're going to move on. So the first thing, I got some good news for you. So what you need to do to help wildlife is you need to be lazy. Be a lazy gardener. You will be landscaping for nature, or naturescaping, as we like to say. So when it's the end of the season and your grass is growing, skip that last mow. Let the grass stay long. If your plants have gone to seed and there's remaining berries, don't clean it up, just leave it. Leave it for the critters. And so what you're doing by doing this, as this picture shows of the beetle in the grass, is you're providing homes for overwintering insects that then, when the springtime rolls around, they will provide food for springtime birds. And not only that, but by leaving seeds and berries, you're leaving food for birds and other, small mammals, things like that to help them survive. So just leave it. And also the leaves, leave the leaves. Don't rake up those leaves, just leave them on the ground. Or just, if you do need to clear them a bit, just leave them in a pile. Leaves are wonderful habitat for wildlife, and especially for overwintering insects. Again, moths, butterflies, those kind of things. And they provide also shelter for critters as well. So just, don't just put the rake away. You don't need to worry about it. Again, when in these stormy times, you have branches that come down. Well, you don't have to get rid of them. Just collect them together. You can collect them and to create a brush pile like this picture shows. And brush piles are great. They provide shelter from the cold for various critters, and also safety from predators so they can hide. So amphibians and birds and small mammals, it's a great place for them to go. And when Christmas is over, with your Christmas tree, provided you have a real Christmas tree and you remove the ornaments, why not put that on your brush pile? And then there you go. You enjoy it even longer. Your backyard critters will thank you. And the other thing you can do for landscaping is when the trees die, and say a tree dies and falls over, you have a log on the ground. Well, you don't have to clean that up. You just leave it to rot. I mean, if you need to move it a bit to get it out of the way, that's fine. And then also, if a tree dies and the trunk is still standing, you can leave that to rot. Although you can choose to top it at a safe height so it doesn't fall on anything. And we call those wildlife trees. And so when left standing, wildlife trees are wonderful places for birds to roost. They can create cavities to nest in, but also shelter in for the winter, and also provide food source for birds as well. And when logs are rotting on the ground, they provide shelter for animals such as frogs and salamanders. So your neighborhood-friendly amphibians will really thank you. Okay, so that's the landscaping, or naturescaping, as we say. The next point I wanted to briefly touch on is water, of course, to hydrate. And what we recommend is having an area of clean, accessible water, and a bird bath is a great example. You should keep it ice-free, and so you have a heated one that can be always good, or just make sure you keep the ice out of it. And then again, a bit like the bird feeders, make sure it's a location where the birds won't get predated, that they have some places to run and hide nearby. So placement is also important when it comes to putting out a bird bath. Okay, and then the thing that we always love to recommend is adding native plants. And native plants can have so many benefits in the winter and beyond. Obviously, they provide food, shelter. Our native critters are evolved with them, so they're the best things that they need. And one little tip I want to point out is a good time to plant native plants is actually the fall. And that's because when the rains come, that helps them get established over the winter period. Unlike if you plant them in the spring, which you can do, but then you have the summer months coming and you have to really monitor them to make sure that they survive those drier months. So a little more work. So a lot of Conservancy type groups, stewardship groups, we do a lot of our plantings actually in the fall. Okay, so I just want to touch on a few examples of native plants we recommend. So some provide food, berries, seeds, places for insects. Insects will lay their eggs or burrow into the stems. Common snowberry is an example, and this is a picture I took yesterday showing just the berries left on the shrubs. And they're not maybe the most palatable food, but when the going gets tough, some birds do find them tasty later in the winter. Red osier dogwood as a shrub that has nice red stems, but also is very good has berries, and Sitka mountain ash as well. Some other examples of you want to maybe consider planting evergreen shrubs because they provide extra shelter for animals as well. Some examples are salal, which is a lower growing evergreen shrub, tall Oregon grape, which is shown in this picture of this garden with this, it's the sort of taller shrub with the yellow flowers, that's Oregon grape, and evergreen huckleberry is another great example as well. And don't forget that some ferns stay evergreen as well, so sword fern, and conifers, which I think there's some in this picture too, like Douglas fir trees also are great habitat for critters over the winter as well. But you don't have to remember all this because it's all in a handy resource guide that the Conservancy created. We have a gardening with native plants guide. It's available for download as a PDF for free on our website. You can also purchase copies through our site as well. And they includes a list of 40 plants, native plants, to get you started on your native plant journey. Okay, so that's native plants. And then just to getting here, talking about getting outside to get to know nature is a great way to help, understand and know nature is, the winter is a great time to look for birds and other critters. There's less foliage. You can, when it snows, go out and identify paw prints in the snow. These are prints from a hare. Also, we highly recommend, we're really getting excited about iNaturalist, which is a website and an app where you can take pictures and upload them. People can help you identify things. It's a way to, it's with National Geographic, and it's ability to collect naturalist data from all over the world. I highly recommend you look into it. It's a lot of fun. And then also participate in stewardship events, although this is maybe not the year to go out and be part of events, but hopefully next year, as I mentioned, a lot of groups do plantings in the fall, so they really could use your help. And make a plan, like everything I've talked about, to make a plan for, throughout the year to create habitat. How can you create habitat in your backyard? And leading to that, just my last thing I wanted to mention is the Fraser Valley Conservancy's Nature Stewards program, which I think some of you are familiar with. And this is a program we offer for free, where we will come out and visit your site. If you have habitat, like a bit of forest habitat, wetland, stream, old field habitat, we'll come out and give you personalized information and guidance on how you can improve your backyard for wildlife. And we can, if you have specific questions, if you saw some bats, you see some frogs, you have questions, we're here as a resource to help you. And with that being said, I think that is the end of my presentation. So happy to take some questions.
Great, thanks, Tamsin. I think if I scroll up, I see some of the earliest questions are if Douglas squirrels and European squirrels are able to interbreed. I can answer that. That's no. They're two different species and they cannot create a hybrid. So the answer to that one, Crystal, is no. This question is, can you use brown sugar or coconut sugar in a hummingbird feeder? Now, I know I've seen no to this one. Have you seen anything about that, Tamsin?
I have not. I just keep it super simple. Regular sugar is the way to go, I suspect. Yeah.
From your native plant section, we got a question about the shorter Oregon grape. Is that a good choice as well? Any info on
Yes.
that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. That there's two types of Oregon grape. Generally, I think landscapers tend to gravitate towards the tall one, but absolutely, there's a shorter, slightly smaller version that is just lovely. Yeah, and it's a good alternative to say holly. Because holly is an invasive plant, so it's another good choice to don't choose the invasives.
Great. So we got a question here. If hummingbirds need a stronger sugar to water ratio in the winter to give them more calories?
I would stick with the 4-to-1 ratio. That's been the one that's been most recommended. Yeah, you don't need to change the percentage during the winter.
Right, that's what I've seen as well. It can actually be harmful to increase the sugar ratio because it gets to be too much. So this one, do you offer visits to preschools in the Fraser Valley? I'm guessing this is part of the Nature Stewards program.
Send us an email. We can share some resources we have for schools as well. But generally, it's for private for people's properties. So, but certainly send us a note and we can connect. And the email, the outreach at Fraser Valley Conservancy email, that's one that I've been in touch with all of you that registered. That's how you can reach us. That's a great way.
Great. So this one says, how do air-breathing animals live underwater like beavers? And I can answer that one. So a lot of creatures who breathe with their lungs, like frogs, they can stay underwater for a long time because their metabolism has slowed down. Their body has slowed down, but they still come up to the surface to breathe every once in a while. So they don't stay under forever. They'll stay under for a really long time because their body moves so slowly, but they do come up for a quick breath of air and then back down. So they don't hold their breath all winter. What about when the pond freezes over? Well, you better hope that the water that you're in has quite a bit of oxygen in it. So this is a good example for something like fish. Fish breathe with their gills, and if there's enough oxygen in the water, that'll keep the water safe to live in even when there's ice. Frogs, kind of the same. If you can breathe through your skin, there's enough oxygen in the water that they can survive until hopefully they find a crack in the ice to get that extra breath of air. Okay, this one's for you, Tamsin. How far is your reach in the Fraser Valley?
Well, it trends like east or west. I mean, really to the pretty much anywhere at sort of the Fraser Valley Regional District is what we cover. We have gone as far as Langley, and we consider like Maple Ridge as well.
Great.
Yeah, as far as up to like Chilliwack and maybe a bit beyond.
New West? Question mark?
Not necessarily at the moment, but send me a note if you have specific questions. We could see what at least we can answer and put you on the right path.
So, question about where do slugs go, like banana slugs? Do you know this one, Tamsin?
This is a tough one.
Our slugs can hibernate, actually. So if they find a nice spot under logs, they'll hibernate. And they also lay eggs under logs, which can overwinter. So the eggs themselves will hatch new in the spring. Slugs are pretty tough, as any gardener will tell you. So yes, they can survive the winter. If I scroll up, there was a question, how does brumating help cold-blooded animals survive the winter? So I can answer that one. Brumating helps you to survive by signaling you that it's time to find a place to hide. So if your body temperature is affected by the outside temperature, when it starts getting cold, your body's going to recognize it's time to find a safe place to go. So you'll find that safe place to hide under the log before the temperature gets too cold that you can't move anymore. So that relationship with the external environment, the outside, will tell you when it's time to move and how you can stay safe. More notes from Erica. Thanks for participating, Erica. Beavers stay underwater for a really long time. Oh, yes. So about the beaver lodges. Yeah, so beaver lodges, you can stay nice and warm in a beaver lodge, and there's a little hole up at the top to let air come out. Sometimes you can even see puffs of steam coming out the top of that beaver lodge. It stays so warm in there. All right. Other insects, ants, ladybugs, worms, pillbugs. All sorts of things.
They do lots of different things.
Insects do all sorts of things. Yeah.
A lot of them do overwinter, like I said, in some of the plants, at some of those areas I was talking about. Yeah.
Great. All right, so I'd say that's it for our questions, and we have one more slide before we finish up, so I won't let you go quite yet. Tamsin has one more thing to say.
One more thing to say. Okay, well, first of all, just thank you so much for participating in our first full webinar like this. This has been great. I look forward to seeing you all in person in the future. But what's coming up next for the Nature Stewardship School? Well, first of all, we're thinking about our next one already. Our next topic is going to be how to identify amphibians, which spring is a great time to do that. We don't know if it'll be in person or online, but stay tuned. So I'll be sending you all a survey, and that's an opportunity for you to let us know give us some feedback, and also let us know if you're not registered already to get our emails, to let us know if you'd like to get them on a regular basis. We'll be continuing the Nature Stewardship School in 2021 and hopefully beyond. I think that's pretty much it. Aleesha, is there anything else that I?
Yeah, we got one more question from Deb Jack about enriched hummingbird food, pre-mixed or powdered stuff that you can get, if that's any good. Really what I've seen is the best is just that 4-to-1 ratio. Is that what you've seen?
That's what I've read. That was consistent. Yeah, you don't need anything else. Yeah, I know they want to sell you things, that's for sure. And I would say, for any of this for feeding birds, do a bit of research too. There's certainly tips on sort of what seeds and what feed is best. Obviously ask a lot of questions when you go into the store too.
Great. We got a question. If we registered for this, are we on the email list?
No, not necessarily. So when I send a survey, please make sure that you tell me you are, because then I'll put you on the list officially.
Great. Well, it's 7:29, and I'd say that ends it. Feel free to send us an email or just get in touch with us at any time if you have any more questions, or if you're just interested. We have resources on the Fraser Valley Conservancy website for identification and the native plant guide that Tamsin showed you. So we're always happy to try our best to help you connect with the environment, our critters in the Fraser Valley.
Yes, send us your questions just anytime. We're happy to take pictures. If you see anything cool, take pictures, send it our way. We like identifying things as well.
All right.
And thank you everyone so much.